Welcome, weary traveler of the internet. You've clicked on a very specific video. A very long, mildly unhinged, historically questionable, and sleep-inducingly funny tale about Cleopatra. Yes, that Cleopatra, the queen, the myth, the eyeliner trendsetter, the snakebite drama queen. If you're here to learn, laugh, or just knock yourself out with ancient Egyptian chaos, you're in the right place. So get comfortable, lower those eyelids, and let's begin the epic bedtime journey of the last pharaoh of Egypt. This is Cleopatra, history, lore, and definitely some lies. Told so slowly and dramatically, you'll be asleep before Caesar invades. Act 1. Birth of a pharaoh and some unfiltered family funk. A tale of babies, bloodlines, and sibling spouses. Welcome to Ancient Egypt, Dynasty Drama Edition. Long ago, in a land where the sun scorched sand and shimmered on temple gold, a baby was born who would become a queen, so iconic. Her name would outlast pyramids, empires, and most men's reputations. That baby was named Cleopatra VII, Thea, Philopater. Catchy, right? It translates to Cleopatra VII, goddess who loves her father, which is both touching and, given her family, slightly ominous. She was born in 69 BCE, the nicest year in history if you're into dad jokes and unfortunate coincidences. At this time, Egypt was still technically independent, but it was clinging to sovereignty like a cat dangling from a ledge. And Rome, the big hungry imperial beast, was right below with a napkin tucked in. Egypt had already seen some wild things. Pyramid construction so massive it made modern engineers sweat just looking at the blueprints. Gods with falcon heads, jackal snouts, and enough mythology to fill Netflix for centuries. Pharaohs who ruled as god-kings, hoarded cats, and occasionally married their own siblings like it was an elite social club. But Cleopatra wasn't born into ancient pharaonic Egypt. She was born into the very end of that era, like the final season of a show that's run a bit too long. Her family, the Ptolemies, were Greek rulers who had taken over Egypt after Alexander the Great died in 323 BCE and his generals carved up his empire like leftover birthday cake. One of those generals, Ptolemy the First Soter, said, "You know what? I'll take Egypt," and thus began a dynasty that ruled Egypt for almost 300 years. But here's the kicker. Even though they ruled Egypt, they never stopped being Greek. Most of the Ptolemies didn't even speak Egyptian, which is like moving to Paris and refusing to learn how to say baguette. By the time Cleopatra was born, the dynasty had devolved into a reality show called Keeping Up with the Ptolemies, complete with family feuds, backstabbing, poisonings, and more weddings between siblings than anyone is comfortable admitting. Her father was Ptolemy XII Auletes, aka the flute player, and not in a cool jazz band kind of way. His reign was, let's say, economically experimental. He liked music, taxes, and bribing Romans with Egyptian gold to keep him on the throne. In fact, when the people of Egypt got fed up with him and tossed him out, again, like expired hummus, he ran to Rome and literally paid them to reinstall him. Rome said, sure, gave him soldiers, and stuck him back on the throne with all the grace of a cat returning a dead mouse. Now Cleopatra, as a little girl, watched all this. She was a Ptolemy, but a different kind. Sharp, curious, and weirdly into learning. She wasn't content being a jewel-covered political chess piece. While other royals were practicing eyeliner techniques and learning how to pose dramatically on golden thrones, Cleopatra was learning languages. She eventually spoke at least 7, some say 9, including Greek, Egyptian, finally, Hebrew, Aramaic, Ethiopian, Median, Parthian, and probably the secret language of cats, given how much she was adored in Egyptian culture. This made her a unicorn in her own family. Imagine being the only person at a family reunion who reads the instructions before building IKEA furniture. She was that one. By the time she was a teenager, Cleopatra had been trained in politics, philosophy, oratory, and charm. She could quote Homer in one breath and debate tax policy with the next. She could host a dinner party and start a revolution in the same outfit. She also knew that her family was, how shall we say, snakier than a basket of cobras wearing wigs. That would come in handy. A word about the gods and eyeliner. In Egypt, gods were everywhere. You couldn't throw a bread roll without hitting a temple, a priest, or a statue of Horus doing something majestic. The Ptolemies had wisely adopted a few Egyptian customs to look legit, and Cleopatra leaned into this, hard. While she was ethnically Greek, she styled herself as the reincarnation of the goddess Isis, the divine mother, protector, and all-around boss lady of Egyptian mythology. Cleopatra's political genius lay in this spiritual cosplay. By associating herself with Isis, she wasn't just queen, she was divine. Not just pretty on a coin, but literal goddess incarnate. Oh, and about that eyeliner? Not just for drama, though yes, that too. Kohl, the black eyeliner she wore, had medicinal purposes. It protected against eye infections, glare from the sun, and bad vibes. Seriously, it was thought to repel evil spirits. So Cleopatra's look, historical SPF. Meanwhile, in the wings, the looming shadow of Rome. Now let's talk about the big scary elephant in the world, Rome. By the time Cleopatra hit her teenage years, Act 2, family drama and sibling husbands. Let's be perfectly clear about something right up front. Ancient royal families were deeply weird, and no dynasty embraced the chaos like the Ptolemies. These people treated sibling marriages not as disturbing anomalies, but as, like, LinkedIn qualifications. So when Cleopatra's dad croaked in 51 BCE and willed the throne to Cleopatra VII and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, it wasn't shocking that they were expected to rule together. And yes, rule together also meant get married, because nothing says stable monarchy like a forced marriage between an 18-year-old and her preteen brother who still thinks frogs are funny. Let's pause here for a moment. Take a deep breath. Now picture Cleopatra, in her finest linen robes, sitting on a throne next to her co-king husband who can't legally drink milk without supervision. Awkward. But Cleopatra, being clever and ambitious, tried to make it work. She had no illusions about sibling loyalty. This was a girl raised in a house where dinner knives were also political statements. And the moment she began ruling solo-ish, asserting her authority and issuing coins with only her face on them, scandalous, she drew the ire of the royal advisors, particularly a man named Pothinus, a snake with a beard who served as regent for baby bro husband. Pothinus didn't like Cleopatra's independence, or her confidence, or the fact that she spoke in full sentences. So he did what court officials have done since time immemorial. When faced with a competent woman, he started plotting. With the support of the army and court factions loyal to Ptolemy XIII, mostly bribed or terrified, Cleopatra was pushed out of Alexandria. Not like, please take a leave of absence. More like, pack your sandals, don't let the temple doors hit you on the way out. So Cleopatra, still in her teens, fled the capital with her younger sister Arsinoe and regrouped near the Egyptian-Syrian border. But instead of pouting or writing angry scrolls in exile, she did something incredible. She built an army. Like Beyoncé at Coachella, she planned her comeback with military precision, bold style, and a bit of divine energy. Meanwhile, in Rome, the Senate does a stabby stab okay, not that stabby stab yet. But the Roman Republic was already cracking like a poorly baked pita. At this time, Julius Caesar was in a dramatic feud with Pompey the Great, his former ally, now bitter rival, now stressed-out enemy. The two had been part of the first triumvirate, Latin for three powerful dudes who don't trust each other, along with Crassus, whose death by molten gold was ironically on brand. Now, with Crassus gone and Caesar rising in power, Pompey fled to Egypt, hoping to get help from the local king. And wouldn't you know it, Egypt was in the middle of its own juicy civil war. So, when Pompey arrived on the shores of Egypt, tired, desperate, and hoping for an alliance, Ptolemy XIII had him killed, just like that, on the beach, stabbed by assassins and presented to Caesar like a particularly messy welcome gift. Caesar's response: what? When Julius Caesar landed in Alexandria in 48 BCE and was handed Pompey's severed head in a box, he was not pleased. Not because he liked Pompey, he didn't, but because Caesar was a political creature. He preferred defeating enemies in front of crowds, not finding their heads in snack packaging. Public executions were one thing. Surprise decapitations were just bad manners. So Caesar, now awkwardly hosted by Ptolemy XIII, stuck around in Alexandria under the guise of investigating. In reality, he was probably thinking, who's in charge here? Why is everyone so stabby? Where's the wine? Enter Cleopatra. The carpet moment. Theatrical greatness. Deluxe edition. Here's where things go full Hollywood. Legend says Cleopatra wanted to plead her case directly to Caesar, but couldn't exactly waltz into the palace. Her brother's goons would kill her faster than you could say filicide, so what did she do? She snuck into the palace rolled up in a carpet, yes, an actual carpet, or possibly a sack of linens, or maybe a fancy laundry hamper. Sources vary, but all agree that she was smuggled in, unfurled before Caesar, and appeared like an ancient Beyoncé in a dramatic music video. Imagine the scene: Julius Caesar, worn out from war and beach beheadings, brooding by a Roman column. A servant struggles to carry a very large, suspiciously heavy roll of carpet. Suddenly, Cleopatra emerges like a divine jack-in-the-box. She's radiant, she's eloquent, she smells like myrrh and ambition, and she is not here to play. Caesar, 52, powerful, ruthless, definitely into smart women, is immediately impressed. Boom. Alliance formed. Caesar versus Ptolemy. Alexandria gets Bernie. With Caesar's support, Cleopatra re-entered the political scene, and Ptolemy XIII was furious. He declared war. Streets turned violent. The palace was under siege. At one point, Caesar reportedly set fire to some Egyptian ships in the harbor, and the flames spread to the Library of Alexandria, which, if true, is one of history's worst oops moments. Today's historians argue only a part of the library was damaged, probably the self-help scrolls and some astrology charts. After months of fighting, Ptolemy XIII's army was defeated. As he tried to flee across the Nile, he drowned, which, in a poetic twist, was both tragic and classic Ptolemy luck. Cleopatra's victory lap now. Cleopatra was queen again, real queen, no brother husband, just a throne, some eyeliner, and one very powerful Roman boyfriend. And guess what? She had Caesar's baby, a little boy named Caesarion, literally Little Caesar, and again, no relation to pizza. Cleopatra claimed he was Julius Caesar's legitimate son. Caesar never publicly confirmed it, because Romans got super nervous about surprise heirs, but he definitely didn't deny it either. Cleopatra named Caesarion co-ruler, because one does not simply raise a royal toddler without also giving him responsibilities. Meanwhile, she decked out Alexandria with fresh palaces, golden statues, and divine imagery of her as Isis incarnate. Cleopatra wasn't just ruling, she was branding. Egypt was once again rich, powerful, and the cultural envy of the Mediterranean. She was 22nd. Arsinoe, sibling rivalry returns. You might be wondering, wait, wasn't there another sister in exile? Why yes, there was. Arsinoe IV, Cleopatra's younger sister, had tried to claim the throne during the chaos of the war. She styled herself as pharaoh, led troops, and even had a brief moment of triumph before being captured by Caesar. He paraded her through Rome in chains, then sent her to a temple in exile. Cleopatra mercifully did not have her executed. Yet, let's just say, keep an eye on Arsinoe, she'll be back. Because in the Ptolemaic family, grudges are like vintage wine, stored, fermented, and served dramatically. Act 3. That time she carpet-bombed Caesar's heart Cleopatra in Rome, Caesar in denial, and the Senate in collective freak-out mode. So, let's recap. Cleopatra is now Queen of Egypt. Her brother husband is dead in a river. Her other brother is too young to ruin anything yet. She's had a son with the most powerful man in the known world, and she's only in her early 20s. Frankly, if this were a YA novel, readers would say the plot was unrealistic. But in reality, Cleopatra's power was very real, and very, very threatening to certain insecure Roman men in sandals. And speaking of Rome, after settling affairs in Egypt, which mostly involved fancy dinner parties, temple dedications, and being worshipped as a goddess, Cleopatra decided it was time to visit her baby daddy in Rome. Because when you're a queen, you don't send a scroll, you show up. All aboard the Sass barge in 46 BCE, Cleopatra sailed to Rome on her royal barge. Picture it: sails of silk, decks of polished cedar, and servants spritzing rosewater into the breeze. Somewhere a harp plays, a leopard naps on the stern. She brought with her Caesarion, her toddler son, who probably had more gold in his baby blanket than the average Roman senator had in his entire career. An army of attendants, tutors, priests, and diplomats, gifts from Egypt, grain, exotic animals, perfumes, papyrus scrolls, and probably something living in a fancy cage. When she arrived, the streets of Rome went wild, and not in a fun, parade with streamers kind of way. Scandal at every turn. Romans were very suspicious of queens, especially foreign ones with more eyeliner than modesty. Cleopatra showed up living like a goddess, speaking like a philosopher, and openly referring to Caesarion as Caesar's son. This was a problem for a few reasons. Caesar was already married to a Roman woman, Calpurnia. Roman law forbade legal marriage to foreigners. So Cleopatra and Caesar? Not a thing. The idea that Caesar might leave Egypt to their son was deeply horrifying to Romans, who preferred their empire to stay within a nice, Senate-approved circle of nepotism. Caesar, for his part, wasn't helping. He built a golden statue of Cleopatra in the Temple of Venus Genetrix, the temple dedicated to the mythical ancestor of the Roman people. So basically, he put her on a goddess pedestal in a national monument. Imagine if someone put their girlfriend's selfie inside the Lincoln Memorial. That's the energy we're working with. The Roman elite were scandalized. Was Caesar going to make himself king? Was he going to install Cleopatra as co-ruler? Was Caesarion going to inherit Rome? Short answer, maybe. Long answer, senators began writing very angry letters. Cleopatra in the shadows. While Caesar did not officially recognize Caesarion as his heir, Cleopatra was not idle. She met with philosophers, artists, and wealthy Roman women. Her presence fascinated and terrified Romans. A queen who ruled in her own right, who spoke fluently, and who wasn't shy about walking into the Senate courtyard like she owned the place, because spiritually she did. Cleopatra likely stayed in one of Caesar's villas, a luxurious compound across the Tiber, but her influence hung in the air like incense. Romans couldn't stop talking about her. Was she a seductress, a witch, a goddess, a threat? Yes. Meanwhile, in Caesar's brain, Caesar had been getting weird. He started dressing in purple, the royal color. He sat on a golden throne in the Senate. He had coins minted with his own face, unprecedented for someone not a king. He accepted the title dictator for life. That last one, not a great PR move. Romans didn't like kings. They had kicked out their last one 500 years ago and hadn't shut up about it since. A king was everything a Roman wasn't. Decadent, absolute, unaccountable, bad at budgeting, and yet Caesar was walking, talking, and throne-sitting like a king. With Cleopatra at his side, the optics were not great. The Ides of March 15th, 44 BCE, Rome, the theater of Pompey. Caesar, against multiple warnings, omens, and probably several overdramatic fortune-tellers, walks into the Senate. He is stabbed 23 times by a group of senators including Brutus, Cassius, and a bunch of other guys who all thought they were doing the Republic a favor. They were not. Cleopatra, across the river with her child, is suddenly no longer the queen in favor. She is a political liability. And just like that, the protection Caesar had afforded her vanished faster than a politician's principles. Cleopatra. Exit, stage left. Now let's be honest. The moment Caesar was assassinated, Cleopatra knew what time it was. Time to go. She packed up her household, including Caesarion, the most politically inconvenient toddler on the planet, and sailed back to Egypt fast, like gold sails snapping in the wind fast. Cleopatra had learned the most important lesson of Roman politics. When the knife-happy senators start looking at you sideways, don't wait for dessert. Rome after Cleopatra. After Caesar's death, Rome fell into chaos. Factions split, armies formed. Everyone with a sword and an opinion claimed to be Caesar's true heir. There were three major players: Marcus Antonius, Mark Antony, Caesar's bestie, party guy, general, loyal-ish; Gaius Octavius, Octavian, Caesar's teenage great-nephew and surprise adopted son; Lepidus, the human placeholder. These three formed the second triumvirate, which is Latin for "we all hate each other, but we hate Brutus more." Cleopatra? She watched. She waited. She knew Antony. She had met him in Egypt during Caesar's campaign, and she suspected that of all the Roman power players, he might be the one worth betting on. But she didn't reach out, not yet. She bided her time in Alexandria, ruling, rebuilding, and wrapping her son in as much diplomatic bubble wrap as possible. She wasn't done. Oh no. This was just intermission. Caesarion, the living problem. Now let's talk about this kid. Ptolemy 15. Caesar, Caesarion, was Cleopatra's pride and joy, the political equivalent of a live grenade wrapped in silk. If he really was Caesar's son, he had a claim not just to Egypt, but to Rome. And that made him a walking threat to Octavian, Caesar's official heir and very serious man with big plans. To Octavian, Caesarion was a glitch in the system, one that would need fixing, eventually. But not just yet. Cleopatra's strategy reset. Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra got back to the business of ruling. She strengthened trade routes, restored temples and monuments, continued her branding as a goddess incarnate, hosted dignitaries and scholars, probably ate grapes while reclining luxuriously, but she was also watching Rome, listening, plotting, and when Antony summoned her a few years later, she would make another entrance. Act 4, Cleopatra and Mark Antony. A soap opera in sandals featuring gold-plated boats, twins, drunken negotiations, and at least one nervous Roman heir. First, a little Roman meltdown. After Julius Caesar was turned into a Caesar salad by the Senate, Rome did what Rome did best. It freaked out. Enter Mark Antony, Caesar's right-hand man and general. Tall, brawny, charming in a "I will definitely drink your wine and crash on your couch" kind of way, Antony quickly seized control of Caesar's legacy, money, and loyal soldiers. Unfortunately for him, Octavian, Caesar's surprise heir, was also a thing, and he was young, skinny, and furious. Octavian was basically the human form of a carefully written legal document and had all the charisma of a marble column. But he was calculating, relentless. and just as determined to claim the Roman throne. So what did they do? They teamed up. The second triumvirate was formed: Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, aka Other Guy There 3. Their job? Hunt down Caesar's assassins, restore order, and not kill each other in the meantime. Spoiler, they mostly failed at that last part. Meanwhile, Cleopatra was still awesome. Back in Egypt, Cleopatra was not exactly waiting around in pajamas. She'd returned after Caesar's death with Caesarion, dodged political backlash, kept the grain flowing, and made Alexandria the kind of city that had both libraries and drunken leopard parades. But the Roman world was shifting again, and Cleopatra was ready to play her next move, especially when the second triumvirate sent Mark Antony to negotiate with her. Antony had summoned her to Tarsus, in modern-day Turkey, to explain why Egypt hadn't been helping the Roman war effort enough. You know, grain shipments, loyalty pledges, bribes, the usual diplomatic fun. Cleopatra heard his summons and went, "Oh, you want a meeting? You want me to come to you? Cool, let me just bring my floating palace." The barge of ultimate power. This, my friends, is when Cleopatra weaponized drama. She didn't just sail to meet Antony. She didn't just arrive. She descended like a myth. Her ship was covered in gold, its sails made of purple silk, its oars silver, beating the water in time to music. Cleopatra sat on deck dressed as Aphrodite, surrounded by servants dressed as cupids and nymphs, while perfume literally scented the wind. Local fishermen thought she was a goddess. Antony, seasoned general, breaker of swords and drunken conqueror of Gaul, took one look and basically melted into a toga-shaped puddle. He was completely and utterly Cleopatra'd. The party that never ended. Once Antony came aboard, things escalated faster than a toga at a frat party. Cleopatra threw banquets every night. Exotic foods, fire breathers, musicians, dancers, enough wine to hydrate an army. She played dice with him, told stories, quoted Greek philosophers, probably beat him in drinking contests, and generally made every Roman woman look like cold toast by comparison. Antony, whose kryptonite was fun and flattery, forgot entirely that he was supposed to interrogate her, and instead fell face first into a full-blown love affair. And Cleopatra? Oh, she was playing chess. She knew Antony was Rome's new rising star. She also knew he was a man who liked shiny things, emotional validation, and being adored. And boy, could she deliver. Their political alliance quickly turned romantic, then deeply romantic. Then, let's build an entire lifestyle brand around this, romantic. Cleopatra and Antony. Relationship goals and warnings. Their relationship was legendary. They formed their own exclusive drinking club, the Inimitable Livers. They dressed as gods for public events. They played pranks on each other, like the time Cleopatra supposedly faked fishing success by planting fish on Antony's hook. They partied in disguise among commoners and left gold coins behind. They challenged each other to ever more extravagant games, bets, and seductions. It was like a power couple from Greek myth, but with more wine and fewer monsters, and the public loved it. Well, some of the public. Octavian, watching from Rome, hated it. But wait, twins. In 40 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to twins, a boy named Alexander Helios, sun, and a girl named Cleopatra Selene, moon. Yes, she literally gave them celestial names, because subtlety is for peasants. The birth of Antony's children by Cleopatra made the political situation very complicated. Antony was already technically married to a Roman woman, Fulvia, who was not amused. And now he had an Egyptian queen bearing future mini-Antonys. Rome was side-eyeing hard, but Cleopatra wasn't just producing heirs. She was building a dynasty, one that blended Roman ambition, Egyptian legacy, and Greek culture into a golden, incense-scented empire of the future. She wasn't a side chick, she was the queen of queens. The donations of Alexandria. Fast forward to 34 BCE. Antony and Cleopatra are now fully partnered. She's had a third child by him, a son, Ptolemy Philadelphus, because they were running out of celestial names, and Antony is now helping run Egypt, like it's a family business. To celebrate their divine couplehood, they hosted an enormous ceremony in Alexandria known as the Donations of Alexandria. In this spectacle, Antony publicly declared Cleopatra Queen of Kings, crowned Caesarion as King of Kings, claiming him as Caesar's legitimate son, gave huge chunks of Roman-controlled territory to Cleopatra's children, sat beside her in golden thrones, dressed like Dionysus and Isis. To be clear, this was political dynamite. Antony was a Roman. He had no authority to just give land away, especially to his Egyptian lover and her glittering horde of semi-divine toddlers. Octavian, back in Rome, had a meltdown so intense the Senate trembled. This was not just scandal anymore, this was treason. Rome's PR machine goes berserk. Octavian, cold as marble and twice as ambitious, launched a full-scale propaganda war. He told Rome that Cleopatra had bewitched Antony. Antony had abandoned Rome for Egyptian decadence. Antony wanted to move the capital to Alexandria. Cleopatra was planning to make Caesarion emperor. Also, she was probably a witch, just saying. And then, the pièce de résistance. Octavian read Antony's will aloud in the Senate, which he totally wasn't supposed to have, but whatever, it's Rome. In that will, Antony acknowledged Caesarion as Caesar's son, wanted to be buried in Alexandria, not Rome. This was all the Senate needed. Octavian declared war, not on Antony, but on Cleopatra. And Cleopatra, she smiled, because Cleopatra had read this play before. She'd played the game with Caesar. Now she was playing it with Antony. She knew how to deal with Rome's power-hungry men and their inferiority complexes. But this time, the stakes were even higher. Because war was coming, ships were being built, armies were forming, the sands were shifting, and Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, goddess of the Nile, mother of heirs, breaker of sandals, was not going down quietly. She was getting her fleet ready. Act 5, The Fall of a Queen, but make it cinematic. Featuring flaming ships, fake deaths, real deaths, spider gods, and Cleopatra's final flex. Scene 1, Welcome to the worst couples cruise ever. The Battle of Actium. Okay, so it's 31 BCE. Rome's had enough. Octavian has completely lost his patience. He's done with love triangles, crown-giving ceremonies, and papyrus-thin political excuses. Now he's got propaganda, legions, and a battle plan. Mark Antony and Cleopatra. They're living like ancient influencers on a yacht, literally. They've turned their military base into a floating love nest on the Ionian Sea. Here's the problem. They're terrible at war planning together. Antony. Let's fight them on land, Cleopatra. Let's fight them on water. Their generals. Maybe let us do the fighting? Both. No, we're gods now. So they anchor their giant navy at Actium, Greece, and prepare for a showdown with Octavian's much leaner, better managed fleet. Antony's ships, big, slow, majestic. Octavian's ships, small, fast, angry. It was like watching sumo wrestlers fight squirrels in canoes. And then, Cleopatra did something unexpected. She fled, with her ships, right in the middle of the battle. Scene 2, Antony's loyalty test. He did what? When Cleopatra took off with her fleet mid-battle, Antony did the only logical thing. He chased her. That's right. He abandoned the rest of his navy, still fighting and probably very confused, turned his boat around, and followed her into the unknown. Historians are still arguing about this. Was it a secret plan to regroup? Did Cleopatra panic? Was it all love-induced idiocy? Whatever the reason, it doomed their forces. Octavian's fleet won the battle, and Cleopatra and Antony, they were now losers on the run. Scene 3, back in Egypt. Let the doom spiral begin. They return to Alexandria. Morale equals floor level. Political influence equals decaying like old bread. But Cleopatra? Still pulling out all the stops. She fortified Alexandria. She tried to negotiate with Octavian. She even considered sending Caesarion away to safety. Meanwhile, Antony was, busy sulking. This man, once a bold general, now sat in Cleopatra's palace like a sad emoji come to life. He held half-hearted meetings, wrote bad poetry, and probably ate way too many grapes. Rumors flew that Cleopatra might betray him to Octavian to save Egypt and her children. Antony, being emotionally unstable and kind of a mess, believed the gossip and stabbed himself. Yup. Classic Roman solution to relationship issues. Scene 4. Surprise. Cleopatra's not dead. Here's the twist. She wasn't betraying him. She wasn't dead. She was just chilling in her tomb, mausoleum, safety vault. Probably lighting incense and thinking about astrology. Antony, bleeding and dramatic, was informed too late. But in one of the greatest hold-me scenes in ancient history, he had himself carried to her, hoisted up through a window, and died in her arms. Hollywood couldn't write this better. Scene 5. The final negotiation, Cleopatra versus Octavian. Now Cleopatra was alone. Octavian marched into Alexandria, smug and smugger. He wanted to parade Cleopatra through Rome as a war trophy, take control of Egypt and its grain, find Caesarion and eliminate the last heir to Julius Caesar. Cleopatra tried one last play. She had herself dressed in her full queenly splendor, sat in her golden mausoleum surrounded by treasure, and tried to negotiate peace terms that didn't include public humiliation. Octavian smiled, nodded, lied, and basically said, "Sure, you won't be paraded around. Wink." Cleopatra saw through it, and then she made her final move. Scene 6. Death by snake or fruit basket. So how did Cleopatra die? Legend says she had a cobra or asp smuggled in a fig basket, let it bite her, and died regally on her throne. Modern theories suggest it was poison hidden in a comb, or a venom salve, or no snake at all, just a dramatic exit with herbal assistance. Either way, she died deliberately, calmly, and styled to the end. 2 of her loyal servants died with her to ensure secrecy and loyalty. Octavian arrived too late. All he found was a beautifully dressed, very dead queen, and a note that basically read, "You'll never parade me." Mic drop. Scene 7. Aftermath. The fate of the kids, Caesarion, and Egypt Octavian, had Caesarion captured and executed soon after. Too dangerous to let Caesar's real heir live. Cleopatra's other children, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus, were taken to Rome and paraded as trophies. Cleopatra Selene, however, went on to become Queen of Mauritania, modern Algeria and Morocco, thanks to her brains, diplomacy, and inherited eyeliner game. As for Egypt, it became a Roman province, its temples looted, its libraries slowly burned, its last pharaoh gone. Octavian returned to Rome, renamed himself Augustus, and started the Roman Empire. Cleopatra's dynasty, the Ptolemies, ended, but her legacy began. Scene 8. Cleopatra the Legend. Cleopatra lives on. In Shakespeare's plays, in Hollywood, with varying amounts of accuracy and glitter, in museums, novels, operas, coins, perfumes, and video games, in conspiracy theories, feminist manifestos, and eyeliner tutorials. She wasn't just Caesar's lover. She wasn't just Antony's queen. She was the last ruler of an ancient world that vanished in flames and marble dust. A woman who spoke 9 languages, who ruled during wars, who commanded fleets, who played the most powerful empire in history like a lyre, until it broke. And even in death, she controlled her story. Octavian may have taken her throne, but Cleopatra took the myth. Act 6. Cleopatra returns. Reincarnation, conspiracies, and crystal skulls, in which Cleopatra transcends time, gets blamed for everything, and maybe lives in a cave in Antarctica. Scene 1. The Cleopatra conspiracy verse. So, you thought Cleopatra died in 30 BCE? Ha! Adorable. That's what they want you to think. Historians? Controlled by Octavian's ghost? Archaeologists? Too busy looking for Atlantis. The real Cleopatra? Possibly in the following. Theory 1. Underwater tomb of secrets. Whispers abound that Cleopatra and Antony are buried in a sunken temple off the coast of Alexandria. Known as Taposiris Magna, the site has a temple to Osiris, mysterious tunnels. 0 snakes so far. Archaeologist Kathleen Martinez has been searching there since 2004. She claims she's close. Rome claims she's dramatic. We claim, let her cook. Theory 2. Cleopatra the immortal sorceress. Why settle for dead when you can be? A vampire queen, a shadowy Egyptian sorceress, or a time-traveling immortal. In some New Age and occult circles, Cleopatra is believed to have unlocked immortality through ancient rituals, walked away from the asp bite just fine, now serves as a hidden master of wisdom, operating from a fifth-dimensional plane. Basically, she joined the Illuminati and hosts brunch with Merlin. Scene 2. Cleopatra sightings, reboots, and reincarnations. Much like Elvis, Cleopatra doesn't stay buried. She shows up. A lot. In past lives, self-proclaimed psychics, hypnotists, and tea leaf influencers have reported channeling Cleopatra, becoming Cleopatra in former lives, meeting 6 people at once who claim to be Cleopatra reincarnated. What we've learned: Cleopatra has the busiest reincarnation schedule in human history. Apparently she's been a spiritual healer in Sedona, a Hollywood screenwriter, a yoga instructor in Iceland. Also, definitely your cat, in alien lore. You didn't think we'd skip the ancient aliens, did you? Alien theorists believe Cleopatra was guided by extraterrestrials, communicated through obelisks, space phones, may have been a half-human hybrid sent to stabilize Earth frequencies. Do we have proof? Absolutely not. Do we want an X-Files Cleopatra reboot now? Yes, deeply. Scene 3. Cleopatra, the immortal feminist icon, beyond the tabloids, tombs, and TikTok scrolls. Cleopatra endures because she refuses to be one thing. She wasn't just a queen, she was a philosopher, strategist, mother, and master of doing the most. Some modern readings see her as a proto-feminist, ruling in a male world, weaponizing intelligence and image, a cultural hybrid, bridging East and West, a tragic icon, doomed not by snakes, but by the egos of empire. And in her legacy, she keeps shape-shifting. Today, Cleopatra is a Netflix series pitch, a makeup collection launch, a doctoral thesis, a Halloween costume, a controversial casting debate, and, let's be honest, still more famous than Caesar. Scene 4, closing the scroll. As we roll this epic to a close, a few things are certain. Cleopatra VII Philopator was the last pharaoh of Egypt. She lived, loved, lost, and utterly refused to be forgotten. Her story, even at 17,000 words, still feels unfinished. Why? Because Cleopatra refuses to die quietly. Whether she's floating through hieroglyphs, whispering through papyrus scrolls, haunting history lectures, or showing up on your Instagram feed with bold eyeliner tips. One thing's clear: Cleopatra never left. She's just waiting for her next entrance. And so concludes the tale of Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, partner in tragedy, historical mystery, and certified icon. We've sailed the Nile, survived Roman drama, dodged conspiracies, and perhaps dozed off somewhere around Act 4. Whether you're still awake or dreaming of golden thrones and sassy sphinxes, know this: Cleopatra lives on, in legends, in scrolls, and now, in your subconscious. Sleep well, dear listener. And remember, if you wake up feeling weirdly royal, it's just the reincarnation kicking in. Good night, and long live the Queen.